Hello and welcome to the introduction of shared workbooks, a rather stable solution for Microsoft Excel's shared workbook. This is just a regular Excel file that uses macro programming in order to avoid lots of the issues associated with shared workbooks, and people who are at least a little bit familiar with these files, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Despite all the issues and limitations with shared workbooks in general, it is actually quite a useful and efficient way if several users can edit an Excel file at the same time without having to buy a separate piece of software. And I think it's therefore not so easy to let go of these shared workbooks, even though everybody's recommending it, just because it's really actually a nice and useful feature. Microsoft has indeed improved the functionality and possibilities for sharing files in Office version 2016. Nevertheless, I will introduce today an Excel file that I started to create back in 2014 with a maritime background. The idea back then was to improve the exchange of information on board ships, especially between the bridge and the engine control room. This file can, of course, be also used in any other scenario, just between several operation centers in general, or just in a big office or company or whatever. The benefit of using this special version of shared workbooks, which I'm introducing here, is that it does a few things behind the scenes by a smart data management and thereby avoiding several common issues encountered when sharing workbook on a network. I've put most of the features and benefits together in this little table here. And the first thing is that it's registering the actual Windows username in this shared workbook. So this is normally not done by Excel by default. But in doing so, you can actually restrict each user to one entity. That means that one single user cannot open the same file several times, and thereby creating multiple entities of himself in the list of shared users. The updating process, that means the file, the saving of the file is automatically done, but it's done differently for each user. That means at a different time. So there is a time shift involved that prevents that several users save the same file at the same time, which will most likely result in a fault message popping up as the file is not accessible for several users in that case. In a similar way, each user will get an individually assigned cell range that cannot be edited by any other user, which possibly could lead to a loss of data. Shared workbooks can handle a maximum of 10 active users who can create and edit line items in the list, and the updating for these active users will be every 30 seconds. And a maximum of additional 20 users can have an observer status that will not allow them to do any changes in the list nor to create any items. But these observers, as the name suggests, they will get at least regular updates every 60 seconds, and they can see the list being updated at least. And another very nice feature, I think, is the possibility to request an acknowledgement from other users, which I'm going to demonstrate shortly. And also you have the possibility to communicate with other shared workbook users by sending a workbook internal mail. But I will show you that in just a minute as well. Let me just briefly explain to you my demonstration environment here. On my computer, I have Windows 7 installed, and in this black window, I have Microsoft Excel 2010 running. I hope you excuse the German software version, but I think it should not be a problem because the workbook itself is completely in English. And here on the right side, in this blue window, I have a virtual machine running. It's also Windows 7, but in here I have I have Excel 2007 installed. And both the host and the guest system, they share a common folder in which I placed the workbook file, the Excel file. And that's basically the simulation of my network environment. I will now go ahead and make a few entries just to demonstrate how the items and the information is being exchanged among the users, and also, of course, how long this takes. I will therefore leave this video unedited and uncut, obviously, so everything that you will see will be in real time. Here on this left window, I have the workbook already open, and the actual display panel looks like that. There are still 2 old items in here which are archived, and Shared Workbooks also has its own ribbon tab which is still hidden up here, but this is how it looks like, and all information and also necessary function can be accessed from here. I will tell you a little bit more about this in just a minute, but before I do so, I will open the workbook again in this virtual machine, and thereby basically simulating a second user that is now taking part in this shared workbook. And what we can see is that there is a little waiting time now involved, because as I said, every user will have his own time slot assigned when the file is being saved, and it just takes a little while now until the user has found his updating rhythm basically. And additionally, we have to say that this user 2 has a yellow button here, which means that this user is actually a observer, and the updating interval associated with the observers is 60 seconds, so that's why it takes a little bit longer right now for this initialization process. And what we can see up here in the other workbook, for example, is that Axcel, this other user, has now a list, and he can see that there are 2 users, and user 2 is on observer status, and of course the same information will be available here. Let's change the status now for this user 2 to active, so that he can also actively edit items. These buttons here, they were disabled before, but now they became enabled. And before I tell you a little bit more about all these items here in the ribbon tab, I will just go ahead now and create an item right away. And the reason I want to do this is that I want to actually take a starting time of this workbook, of this line item here during the time of this demonstration, so that we can actually monitor the different phases this item is going through. And I would just say that there are welding works maybe on deck 10 going on. So as you can see, I will stick to my maritime environment example. I will allow other users to edit the item, and I will just press OK. And you can see that the item is now created with this yellow flag here saying that it will be beginning soon. And you can also see that the updating process was skipped as long as this user form is open, and it won't stay open forever. There's an idle period, so whenever the user is not making any entries, this user form will also close automatically. It will now take a little while, there you go, until user 2 will get this update, and it comes with a gray dot indicating that this is the last item. And I told you already that in this ribbon tab you will get some additional information, and this is the case if you just click into this line item here. Just anywhere in the line item will do, and you will get some additional information, such as when this item was initially created and by whom, and when it was last modified and also by whom, and whether or not this item is allowed for editing by other users. There is another button over here. It's actually supposed to be a list. The list is empty now, as you can see, and it says pending acknowledgements. And what this is all about, I will tell you now. I will demonstrate this one now. I will go ahead and create one more item here. This time around I will use just a template. It saves a little bit of typing time basically, and I will use one more time the time that is still within this demonstration. And as you can see, if you don't know exactly the time when this item will expire, then you can just leave it open by just not ticking that checkbox here. In this case, for this example, I will not allow other users to edit this item, but I will make use of this acknowledgement request. and I can request all users to acknowledge this item, or I can also just select several users individually from a list. Well, obviously the list is very small now. There's only one other user here, so I will select this one. But this feature, of course, has to be used thoughtfully, as it's also stated down here, because you don't want to bother other users with these alarms all the time, because they will get an alarm on their computer. So that's why this feature really should be used thoughtfully. So we go ahead now and create this item, and once again it comes up with a yellow tag saying it will be beginning soon. And meanwhile this other item here that was originally yellow has become red now, because it has entered into an active state, because the time that we set for the beginning was reached, and it automatically turned into active. The same will happen over here the next time this file is saved, and there you go. The status is now active, and our second item is still here. It's yellow with a red dot. And the red dot is indicating that this item has an acknowledgement request, and there are several acknowledgements not yet received. And how this acknowledgement looks like, we can see in just a moment right now. Because now with Axcel, the other user, it pops up as a box, as a dialog, and this user can close this dialog or this user form, but it's not being acknowledged really. It will come back. And the dot is also here. It's still red. And what is interesting to know is that the original creator of this item, he can actually see who has not acknowledged the item yet. And he just has to click into the line item over here, and then he can see from this drop-down list that Axcel is still the one who hasn't acknowledged it. So only when all the users have acknowledged this item, this dot will turn into gray. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I will acknowledge this item here, and then we will see that the dot, as I said, has turned into gray. And it will take a few seconds until also the second user will see this, and also his dot is turning into gray now, and also the list of line items here is now empty as we expected it. I want to show you one more thing. I mentioned that I allowed other users to edit this item over here, this hot work that I initially created in the first place. And what happens is that if I edit this item, there might be the danger that somebody else wants to basically edit the item at the same time. So let's go ahead and see what is going on. And we will see that the item here is still available, but you will see that it cannot be edited, because you see this user will have now a message over here saying that this item is actually currently being edited by user 2. So basically whenever somebody picks up an item for editing, this item is locked for editing to other users. So that's actually quite a very useful thing, and basically also very necessary, because otherwise you would have the case that people are trying to edit items at the same time, and then again information is being lost. Right, and as I said, if I don't make now any entries in this form here, it would close automatically and release this item again. Yeah, so why not? Let's just wait for this to happen, and then we can see that this item will be again open for editing, and then Axcel could go ahead and could make his changes if he wanted to. The next thing I want to show you now, as soon as this box has closed, this dialog, the next thing I want to show you is the internal workbook message. And this function is accessible from here, and it's basically the same box, but it's just a different tab in this form. And what we can do is we can send now a message to other users or to all users. As you know, there's only one other user right now here. So let's say this is a test message, and then we can send that message over to Axcel, and then we can see his message popping up here on the other side. And I have to say that this internal workbook communication is really internal within the workbook, and there's no mail client involved or anything. And the thing is that once the user closes the workbook, then all these messages will be lost. So this you have to know. The messages are not stored there for a longer time to be accessed. So all messages, they are really just for basically an immediate response or an immediate communication between the different users. Right, it will take a little while to for this message to come through to Axcel. As you know, the file first has to be saved on this side, and then it will become available on this side. And as you know, as we are used to from any email, we can delete this one, we can forward it to any other users, or we can just reply. And I reply back to user 2, so the mail is going back the same way it came. Basically, once again, this file is being saved, and the next time this file is being saved, then it will become available also to the other user. Meanwhile, I can demonstrate this other function here, this print protocol. And this is basically an export of the database of all the line items. For whatever reason you might use this data, I don't know. But maybe if you want to have all the items here that were put into this list, you can export this by clicking on that button. And what else do we have in the ribbon tab? I mentioned already, no, I don't think so, these user options here. So you have the possibility to change your status here from observer to active or vice versa. And you can also make settings here for sound options. You can set for notification sounds, and also the change of a status can trigger a sound which you can enable or disable up here as well. I will just close this box right now. If we had more messages, we could actually navigate through them by clicking on these buttons, but obviously there is only one message here. So I will just close that one. And well, what is left for me to show basically, or what I want to show right now, is that we still have this item here that has to be closed manually. So that's what I want to do. This item was originally created by user 2, so it's not allowed for editing by Axcel. That's why it's also not in the list, and therefore we have to go back to user 2, and he will have this item here. And even though other users are not allowed to edit this item, the creator of our item can of course always edit his own item that he created. So I just click on this button, and now, and then we will see that the status has turned from red into green. This line item has expired kind of, and again user Axcel sees that this item is currently being edited by user 2, and in just a moment also this item will come green, and he will see then that this item has come to an end. And the last thing I want to show you is what happens if a connection is lost. And therefore I will enter now the administrator settings. The administrator settings, obviously they are not for all users to be accessed, so that's why it's it does have a password. And if we enter this, you can see that the administrator can set quite a few options here. He can determine how long the items will be kept in the list, so the retention period basically, and he can also set the time, how long this color coding is going on. And furthermore, there is a possibility to set idle periods. So there are 3 time slots here, And an idle period is actually quite important for any network administration that is routinely done by the system administrator, for example, any backups that are being done, and especially routine tasks that could interfere with the saving process of this shared Axcel workbook, and that could possibly produce any error messages. So that's why the administrator can set an idle period when the automatic updating, the automatic saving is being paused, and of course it will resume then after that specific time. The administrator can also make this workbook unshared here, and of course bring it back into the shared mode and also into the exclusive mode, and vice versa. And what I want to do now is I want to enter these standard settings here from Axcel to have a list of all the users. And what I'm going to do right now is I will disconnect user 2 from this shared workbook. That's not really nice of me, but I just want to demonstrate that this is actually something that the user will be told if the connection is lost. So in this case, user 2 will get this message here, and he will also see that his green lamp or yellow lamp or whatever has turned into red, saying that he has lost the connection. And the only thing what he can do is he can only basically reopen the workbook. So he just clicks on that button, confirms it one more time, and then he opens this workbook again, and then he will see that he is part of this workbook again. If we open this here, you can see that he is now reconnected, and that's also a very nice feature in shared workbooks, that you will be told that the connection was lost, and you have the possibility to reconnect to this shared workbook just by pressing basically a button, and then you are back in business. Okay, I think that's basically the principle and the basic function of shared workbooks. The file itself and also some more background information is available on my website www.axcel.webspace.rocks. You can also write me an email. I'm always interested to hear what you think about it, whether you think it's useful or not. Yeah, I like to hear your comments, and that's it from my side, and I thank you for your interest.